tutor Amani. I've been teaching on Tutopiya, mostly math and science subjects. Are you all currently students of Tutopiya, or is this all new to you?
New.
New. And what about you, Mayada?
Yeah, the same new.
Okay. All right. Welcome in that case. So today, want to just do the topic coordination and response. Have you all already gone through this topic in school with your teachers?
Miss, I don't go to school.
You're homeschooled, is it?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. So have you already gone through this topic before?
No.
Okay. All right. So this would be a good new topic to start with. So, all right. What is your initial thought, like the first thought you get when you hear the word coordination and response?
It might be the relation between the body systems, how they coordinate and work together.
Yes, very good.
And how they respond to their work, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, coordination is how our body coordinates with each organ, each thing to respond to a certain stimuli, we would say, right? If something happens in our environment or something happens to our bodies, there should be a response, right? To react accordingly. So we're going to talk about how our body does this. Yeah. So if I'm ever too fast, or if you ever have questions in the middle, please feel free to ask. Yeah. Or let me know. So there's a bunch of subtopics here that we have to go through. Okay, so since this is a new topic for Pyra, let's go through from the beginning, yeah, but the first few topics, I think this bit is quite simple, starting with the nervous system. Pyra, I'm pretty sure you know already what the nervous system is, right?
Yes, Miss.
Do you know that there are two systems within the nervous system itself?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so what are the two nervous systems and what do they consist of?
Yes.
So we have the central nervous system, as mentioned here, and the peripheral nervous system. Okay. So the CNS consists of the brain and the spinal cord. And those are usually where the responses straight away go to get what to do about this stimuli, all of that, yeah? All right, I see we have more participants coming in. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so I'm trying to make this as interactive as possible. Hi, Ashwini. Okay, great. So you can either respond, unmute and respond, or you can respond by chat. That is also fine, yeah? All right, so yeah, back to this. And we have the peripheral nervous system, which consists of all the nerves that is connected to the central nervous system. So these are the two parts that mainly help us coordinate, right? Because you know that the nervous system is quite vast, right? It spreads out throughout your body. So it's connected to each organ, each vessel, all of that. So they help coordinate body functions. Information is sent through the nervous system as nerve impulses. Nerve impulses are electrical signals that pass along the nerve cells known as neurons. So can anybody tell me if they know the three types of nerves? Three types of neurons, sorry.
Hi, can I answer the question?
Sorry?
Can I answer the question?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So one of them, so the three types of neurons, right? So there's one called sensory neurons, I believe one called motor neurons, and then the other one, I think it's if I'm not wrong, it's like they're like interneurons. So between neurons, there's another neuron. I think if I'm not wrong.
All right, great, very good. Thank you for that.
Miss, can I answer?
Yes, of course. Go on.
Motor neuron, sensory neuron, and relay neuron.
Very good. All right. So a bundle of neurons is known as a nerve. And yeah, these are what you have mentioned, right? So sensory neuron, relay neuron, motor neuron. Sensory neuron is one that detects a stimuli and converts it into electrical signals, right? So they're usually connected to sense organs like your skin, your eyes, right? And electrical signals are straight away sent to the CNS, which is whatever's closest. So for example, if it's your hand, the sensory neuron would be connected straight to your spinal cord, right? Because that's the closest. But if it was your eye, the sensory neuron would be directly connected to the brain. So whatever's closest, yeah, it attaches to the CNS. So then you have the relay neuron, or as I'm sorry, I forgot your name. You mentioned interneuron, right?
Yep,
So
I did. Mhm.
a neuron that is found in the CNS, which relays signals around the CNS, out of the CNS to the motor neuron. So it connects the receptor to the motor neuron. So you have one in between. And then finally, you have the motor neuron that carries the impulse from the CNS to the effector muscles. So this neuron will generate a response to any stimuli. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right.
It's clear.
All right. So the structure of a neuron is, I'm sure you've done specialized cells before, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So you know that the body has a variety of specialized cells, and one of them is the neuron. And these are just adaptations of how they are specialized for their function. Yeah. So as a neuron is specialized, it has organelles of a normal animal cell. So it has the basics like cytoplasm, nucleus, mitochondria. Yeah, those are always there. Along with that, they also have additional features that help them with their specialized function. So the cell body inside the central nervous system and the axon stretches out to the peripheral nervous system to the effector. So you can see there's a neuron over here. You can see that this part is extended to the CNS and this part is to the PNS, right? They've even mentioned that. So neurons have a long fiber. Okay, you can see that here. This part is called the axon. So this is important so that less time is wasted on transferring impulses, right? This works really fast. So the axon is also insulated by something called the myelin sheet. So it's actually a fatty sheet. You all know what insulation means, right?
Yes.
So since these are electrical impulses, this needs to be insulated, and that's what the myelin sheet does. So yeah, so you also have sections along it called nodes, and this is how the electrical impulse jumps. Yeah, so it does not just regularly travel, it kind of jumps from node to node. And their cell body contains many extensions called dendrites. So that's over here. This is where the impulses sort of jump from one neuron to the other. So you have it on the cell body and as well as over here at the end of the nerve cell. So these connect. So for example, sure, but you have another end of another neuron over here connected to over here, and it will go on. Yeah. So nerve impulses will sort of jump from this end of the nerve to the next nerve and travel along this and then jump onto the next nerve, so on. Yeah. Any questions so far? So yeah, just a little bit of a closer look on the 3 types of neurons. You can see the differences. You can see here that the relay neuron has, since it's a connecting neuron, it has longer accents on both ends, right? Whereas the motor neuron only has it to one end as well, right? Relay neuron is mostly to connect both of these, yeah? So they do not really need that much of the long accent. All right. So we were talking about the meanings of coordination and response earlier, right? So do you know the difference between voluntary and involuntary responses?
So is voluntary more like things that the body actually makes a decision for to do, whereas involuntary responses are just like reflexes, if I'm not wrong? So they're just inbuilt in you since you're growing up, so you have to do them, you can't control those responses from your body. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And involuntary, kind of the opposite, yeah? Yeah, so voluntary response, oh, sorry. Voluntary is like when it is intentionally done, yes. So as mentioned here, conscious decision means you are intentionally doing it. Yes, that's correct. So basically these are the responses we actually think about doing, yeah? And we make a decision to act a certain way. But involuntary response or a reflex response is something that automatically happens. Like, for example, you know, obviously, if your hand is near something hot, you'll immediately take it away, right? You don't have to think about it. You don't have to make a judgment call on it. You just immediately take it off. So that's called a reflex action or an involuntary response. Yeah. So they are involuntary actions are usually ones that are essential for basic survival. So just imagine if your hand was near something hot and you had to actually use your voluntary response mechanism to think about taking your hand away, you might actually end up burning your hand even more, right? So involuntary actions are, that's why they say they're essential for basic survival, because sometimes we might not even have to think, but our body knows what to do in order for us to survive or not damage our body in any way. Yeah. So they are essential to basic survival and are rapid, whereas voluntary responses would take longer as we consider what the response might be before doing it. Yeah, so we're making a decision, right? Any questions there? All right. So here, I'm not sure why this is not very clear, but yeah, you can see that the similarity between both response mechanisms both involve a stimuli, nerve impulse, neuron, and effector. So they both go through the same pathway, you could say, right? They both use nerve impulses and neurons in the effector. That does not change. And they both they're both responses to a certain stimuli, right? So that's the only similarities. And okay, differences is one is conscious, one is unconscious. One involves the somatic nervous system, whereas the other involves the autonomic nervous system. So you might not need to necessarily know this just yet. And yeah, these 2 points, don't worry about it too much. It's just additional information. And yeah, so voluntary response involves skeletal muscles and the effector, whereas involuntary muscles usually use smooth muscles and glands as effectors. Yeah. So now we have a little more into detail about the involuntary response. This is called the reflex arc. So this is what basically happens when your body is in immediate danger of, I don't know, harming itself or any need for survival. This is how you get your immediate response. So there's an order here, you can see, right? You'll get a stimuli. Yeah, for example, let's take the burning example again. Maybe you were ironing something, right? And you didn't notice, but your hand sort of like touched the iron, right? So your initial stimuli would be the heat, yeah? And then your sensory neuron in your skin would detect that, okay, there's a heat change in this part of the skin. It would take it to the relay neuron, which is inside the CNS, either the spinal cord or the brain. And then that will start to produce a response and send it to the motor neuron. The motor neuron now has the message and will deliver the message or the response, the response to the effector muscle. So the effector, it could be a muscle or it could be a gland. In this case, in our example, since we're talking about our hand, it's going to be a muscle. So the effector, after gaining the message from the motor neuron, would immediately take your hand off. So imagine how fast this happens. Yeah, you wouldn't even think that, okay, the body actually goes through each of these processes for you to take your hand out in 1 second. So that's how fast nerve responses are. Does that make sense? Is this okay for everybody? Because this is kind of important for questions. Okay, thank you, Kara. Okay, can anybody give me another example for a reflex arc?
Could it be like if we okay, no, but it already mentions that here, like sharp or hot, right? So if anything which has to do with like the senses. So for example, if I go, for example, touch an electric source, then that will already do a reflex arc, which is I will take it away from it.
Yes, exactly. Sure. Yeah, that's another example. So it basically goes through all of these processes again, right? Okay, good. Thank you.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Miss, I had a question, just a quick one. It was just a running thought, right? If someone asked us to actually describe specifically what the function of a relay neuron is, what exactly would you need to write down there in the context of a reflex arc?
This is for the relay neuron, is it?
Yeah, relay neuron.
Okay. So can I ask you a question? Where's the relay neuron?
So if I'm not wrong, the relay neuron is between the sensory neuron and the motor neuron.
Right. And it's usually found in the CNS. Okay. So it's found in the brain and in the spinal cord, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So one function is that it, because it's in the middle of the sensory and the motor neuron, it allows those two neurons to communicate, right?
Okay, and then this communication, if I'm not wrong, happens through electric impulses, right? Which go through the relay neuron, which reaches the motor neuron from
Yes,
the cell.
yes, yes. All the neurons communicate through electrical impulses.
Okay, okay.
That's the only way they communicate. Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. Anyone else has any questions? No, okay, all right. So moving on, so this is basically explaining that. Okay, so here's another example. They have, so sorry, given about a pin. Okay, so for example, you know, when let's say a finger touches a pin, it is detected by a pain pressure receptor in your skin, right? Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, give me a minute, please. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So, your hand touches up or like gets pricked on a pin, and the pain or pressure receptors in your skin would detect this. So the pin touching your skin is the stimulus. Start there. And then the second thing is your sensory neurons in your skin will detect this impulse and send it to the spinal cord, right? There, the electrical impulse is passed on to the relay neuron. So the relay neuron is within the spinal cord itself, and it connects to the motor neuron. So basically sends a message on what to do as a response, sends it to the motor neuron, where the motor neuron would then send the message to the effector muscle to, okay, you have to take the hand away. So yeah, then the muscle would contract and pull up the hand away from the sharp object. All okay?
Yes, we get it.
All right. So how do these messages actually pass from one neuron to the other? So we saw earlier that a neuron has something called dendrites, right? Oh. So over here, you have dendrites at the end, right? And so the previous neuron or the neuron after this is also going to have dendrites at the end. And we remember we said that electrical impulses actually jump because there's a space here. So it doesn't necessarily just move along one straight line. It has to jump from dendrite to dendrite in each neuron, right? So there's a certain mechanism of how this happens as well, because there's actually a space in between those dendrites in that case, right? So the space between the dendrites or the space between the two neurons is known as a synapse. Right. So the process, this is the process how the impulse is passed on from across the synapse. So just like I mentioned before, the neurons never touch each other. So there is a space, and that's called the synapse. And the electrical impulse travels along the first axon. So yeah. Wait, let's see if they have a diagram instead of me drawing it, because that won't be nice. Okay. Okay. So excuse my drawing, but yeah. So let's say this is our first neuron. This is our second neuron, so on. Yeah. All right. So the electrical impulse travels along the first axon, and this triggers the nerve ending. So these are the nerve endings, right? Of the presynaptic neuron. So the first neuron is called the synapse between the first neuron is called the presynaptic neuron. Okay. This is the one that's going to pass on the electrical impulse. The postsynaptic neuron is the one over here, the one who receives the impulse. Is that clear? Difference between presynaptic and postsynaptic? Presynaptic is the one who is going to pass on the impulse. Postsynaptic is the one who's going to receive the response. Okay. So these are the kind of key terms you'll have to remember when answering your questions, which is why I'm. Is everyone okay with those two terms?
Yes, Miss.
All right. So yeah, the presynaptic neuron, which is the first one over here, is going to release chemical messengers called neurotransmitters from vesicles which fuse in the presynaptic membrane. So they actually have these at the membrane of these endings. Okay. And so the neurotransmitters would diffuse across the synapse. So they would diffuse across the synaptic gap, and bind with the receptor molecule of the second neuron or the postsynaptic membrane. Okay. So you can see that here. This is a close-up of the presynaptic and the postsynaptic endings. You can see that there's a gap here. So that's the synaptic gap. And you can see them diffusing from one end to the other. Okay. So here, for example, they have given you two nerves. Yeah. And you can see at the dendrites here only, they've zoomed in and showed you over here. So yeah, so once it travels to the second neuron, the neurotransmitters, they travel down the second axon. So again, they would go down to the second neuron. The neurotransmitters are then destroyed to prevent continued stimulation of the second neuron, which would cause repeated impulses to be sent. So each impulse, for example, this is our presynaptic neuron, right? The first impulse would come, and they would, you have synaptic vesicles, you can see over here, neurotransmitter molecules inside it, and it will diffuse across to the postsynaptic neuron. Once that impulse has been sent, okay, they've received the response, and then the electrical impulse is going to the second neuron, these neurotransmitters will be destroyed, or else the same response would be repeating, right? Okay. We don't want the same response to be repeated again and again. That's not the idea. Once it's done, we stop, right? So yeah, that is why the neurotransmitters are destroyed after the stimulation is sent down from the second axon to avoid repeated impulses. Is that okay? Is everyone okay with this so far? I know this might be a little bit confusing. Thank you, Ashwini. So, okay. Once they are destroyed, so synapses ensure that the impulses only travel in one direction. So that avoids any confusion within the nervous system. As this is the only part of the nervous system where chemical messages are chemical, opposed to electrical. It is the only place where drugs can act to affect the nervous system. So, for example, this is where heroin works. So, see, in the entire nervous system, we're using electrical impulses, right? But the synaptic vesicles are the only place that there are chemical molecules. So the neurotransmitter molecules are chemical, right? Everything else about this is electrical, but this spot exactly is chemical. So that is why when you have drugs, they directly target this area. Yeah, because drugs are also chemical. This is the only chemical place in the nervous system. So they target this area, and that's why your impulses won't work right. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so I'll go through one more time. Yeah, so neurons, they don't touch each other. So they have a gap in between, which is called the synapse. And this is how electrical impulses kind of jump from one neuron to the other, right? So when there's an electrical impulse from the first axon, or we call it the presynaptic neuron, this triggers the endings of this neuron to release chemical messengers called neurotransmitters from those synaptic vesicles. Yeah. So message comes in, presynaptic neuron, then the endings get stimulated, they're ready, they know that there's an impulse coming. So the vesicles are told to release neurotransmitters. These vesicles will bind to the membrane and then release the neurotransmitters, where they will diffuse from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron, where they will be received. And once they are received, they will carry the electrical impulse down their axon, and this cycle will continue. As soon as they receive the response and the response goes down to the second second axon, the neurotransmitters over here will be destroyed to avoid repeated impulses. This is the only place where chemical reactions occur in the nervous system. So this is usually where drugs target their effect in the nervous system as well. All right, so that was a summary. Any questions? All right. Kara says no. What about the others? All good?
Yes, it makes sense.
If it's not clear, if you want me to explain one more time, I'll be happy to, yeah? Any doubt, any questions, I'll be happy to clear them out. Okay, so we have our sense organ. We're not going to learn about all of these sense organs. So according to the syllabus, it's going to be the eye. Receptors, as you know, are present everywhere in your sense organs. We have receptors on our skin, on our tongues, on our eyes, everything. So those are all specialized cells. Yeah, and they're specialized in different way according to the area that. So their main function is to detect a change in the environment or change in the body that would stimulate an electrical impulse to receive a response according to it, right? So receptors are actually a very important part of the whole coordination and response process, right? Because they're the ones who start it. Without them, we wouldn't know if there's even a change or not, if a response is required or not, right? So sense organs, as you know, are the group of contain a group of receptors that respond to specific stimuli. Sorry. Once the receptor cell in the sense organ has been stimulated, it generates an electrical impulse. This is passed on to the sensory neuron, which carries it to the central nervous system, and response will be decided on, and the pulse will be transferred to the motor neuron, and it carries it to the effector. So this is the same reflex arc process, right? They're just elaborating on it. Okay, so here you have the structure of the eye. Yeah. And okay, so I'm sure you, most of y'all would know these two parts, very common. The lens, the iris, sorry, not the iris, the pupil and the retina. I'm sure you've done it before, right? And maybe this. Have you all done these 4 parts before?
Yes, I have done this. I don't know about that.
All right. Oh, sorry, Ashwini. Can you hear me now? All right. Can anyone tell me the functions of these parts?
So the function of retina, if you start with, is basically to capture like the photons, or basically the light particles, and then transmit them along like the neural pathways within the eye, if I'm not wrong, to then ultimately send it through the optic nerve and into the brain to find some sort of reaction or response to it.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. And the lens and the pupil. Does anyone else want to try? Yes, lens does adjust visibility. True. Oh, sorry. Actually, it's the pupil. Yeah. Okay. Amount of light going into the eye. Okay. So the rest is probably very new. Like the lens in the camera, the basic function of the eye lens is to transmit and focus light onto the retina. Yeah. To facilitate this, it contains one of the highest concentrations of proteins of any tissue. Okay, yeah. Okay. So structure might not necessarily be essential, but you will need to know the functions of each of this. So yeah. So there might be some new stuff here other than the 4 that I mentioned, which you might have heard of earlier. So if you want to take down, conjunctiva is the one right in front here. You can see this is the layer that protects the eye, protects the cornea. Cornea is a tough, transparent part of the outer surface of the eye that allows light through. Iris is the ring that controls the amount of light that is let into the lens. So you can see that over here. Where is that? Oh, here. Okay. So these are the ones that kind of, when your pupils dilate and whatnot, yeah, when your pupils dilate and contract also, they involve the iris. So that controls how much light you let in, right? So you have the conjunctiva in front of the cornea, all of that for protection. Pupil, the hole in the middle of the iris that changes the size. So that's what we usually observe. Like I said, when we dilate or contract eyes according to the light. Aqueous humor is the liquid part in front of the eye. Lens, like you all mentioned, focuses the incoming light, can change thickness according to distance of focus of vision. Ciliary body muscles that pull the lens to make it thinner or thicker. So yeah, this is what kind of helps. You can see that it's connected to the lens over here. This is kind of what helps the lens adjust the amount of light, yeah, passing through. So this would kind of contract or relax and make it thicker or thinner. So then you have suspension ligaments that connect the ciliary body to the lens. Vitreous humor, which is another form of liquid that forms the volume of the eye. Retina, like mentioned before, is the inner surface of the eye where the receptors are present, and they are the ones that are going to carry the impulses to the optic nerve and then to the CNS. Choroid is the layer between the retina and sclera. Fovea, most of the light is focused onto this point of the retina. This is where most of the receptors are. I think that was what's mentioned. Yeah, here, fovea. So you can see there's this kind of a dent here. That's because it's mostly packed with most of the receptors. This blind spot is when it's the spot that we can't see. So I'm sure you've noticed that even if you're looking straight, you can kind of see what's around you, right? But there comes a point where you cannot see anymore, right? From the sides, even though you're looking straight, you have a rough idea of what your background on the left and right looks like, even though you're looking quite straight. But there's a point where you can't see anymore, and that's called the blind spot, because beyond this point, an image won't form on the retina, right? Yeah, exactly. Good, Ashwini. Blind spot does not contain any sensory neurons. Yeah, so anything that, any image that comes to the light and forms on this spot, we cannot see. So that's why beyond a certain point, things are not visible. Yeah, optic nerve we went through. Sclera is the tough outside protection layer of the eye. So, okay. So yeah, these are mainly what controls the amount of light getting into the eye. They all sort of help with that. These help with receiving the response from whatever we see. And the others, most of the liquids and the cornea, sclera help with protection. Is that okay? All okay, guys?
Yes.
Right, great. All right, so we have pupil reflex. So we talked about reflex actions before. We know that this happens with our sense organs. So we went through thoroughly one of the sense organs, which is the eye. And this also goes through a reflex action, especially when it comes to light, right? immediately if a light, I don't know, if a torch is shined onto your face, your eyes know how to control it, right? Either it will contract, or either it's too much light that they will tell you to shut your eyes altogether, right? Beyond what they can control. So those are also reflex actions that you're not necessarily controlling. So pupil reflex. The eye also adapts to the environment by changing its size, the size of the pupil. This is called pupil reflex. So at dim light, you can see that the pupils dilate. It dilates because it's trying to get more light in. It's dark, right? And we need light to see. So it's dilating to absorb as much, to get through as much as light possible. And if it's during bright light areas, it's quite the opposite. It's going to contract because it doesn't need that much light to see things. So it's going to contract and let little light pass through. So this is done by the iris contracting and relaxing. The iris is the one actually controlling the contracting and relaxing, but we can see our pupils are the one that's dilating and contracting. That's because that's the part that is visible to us on the outside, right? Any questions? Okay. Accommodation is the term we use when the lens changes the thickness to focus on an object, right? So you know that sometimes when an object is far or when an object is close, we might need to focus ourselves, our eyes a little differently. And this is also, again, not something you will voluntarily do unless you're trying really hard to read something, but this is also kind of an automatic response, right? So this changing of the lens is called accommodation. So this is done by altering the lens amount of refraction of light. So you can see distant objects. The ciliary muscles are all relaxed. So the suspensory ligaments are stretched and there is high muscle tension, right? So the lens shape is going to be thin and less curved. You can see that here. And the opposite happens for nearer, closer objects. The ciliary muscles are contracted. The suspensory ligaments are slackened or like relaxed. So the muscle tension is now low within the lens. And the lens shape is more fat and more curved, thick basically. Yeah. So I'm sure you've noticed, like when we're reading normal things, our eyes are more relaxed than when you're really trying to read something far away, right? Of course, neither one of the two, if you do for too long, it's either way going to not be good. But yeah, it's easier for us to read things that are right in front of us than trying to really focus on something far away and try to read it, right? That's because of this muscle tension. Any questions so far? All right. Okay, so the next part is going to be kind of a big one, which we might not have time for today, actually. Okay, so what we'll do is let's try a small quiz with everyone. So I want to show you the Tutopiya platform for whoever's new. I think Kyra is new. Ashwini, are you new to Tutopiya? Are you new to Tutopiya, Ashwini, or are you already a student of Tutopiya? I'm new, okay. And Mayada as well, right? So if you decide on joining us, this is basically how your platform would look like, your account. And you can also register for this called Quiztopia. So this is the best thing for IGCSE. It's a platform it's a part of our platform that has like thousands of questions for every subject, right? So we go to Quiztopia this way. And okay, so I'm gonna explore all. You can filter according to the curriculum that you are doing. So right now we went through Cambridge IGCSE, we went through biology, and you can even select your paper. So these questions are made from past papers, textbook, teachers have made them on their own. So there's like a lot, a mix of things, right? And you basically go through everything that way. So let's say paper 2, for example. And we were doing the topic coordination and response over here. All right. So now the system has sort of filtered all of the subtopics in coordination and response. So we did this one, nervous control in humans and sense organs. The other 3, I had to stop today. Sorry, guys, because it's kind of a very long topic. So, okay, let's try nervous control in humans. So, okay, now let's try this before. Yeah, so these, you would get your questions, right? Okay, shall we try 3 questions, 1 each? Yeah, okay, who wants to try the first one? Any volunteers for this question? Okay, Kyra, go ahead. So which structures could be found at X and Y?
D.
B, X
D.
and Y. Did you say D or B? I'm sorry.
B.
B, okay, brain and leg, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so option 4 is B. Okay. What? Okay, Kyra, can you explain your answer, please? Why did you think it was brain here? Oh, Miss, you said D. Okay, sorry, my bad. Yeah, that makes more sense. Okay. Yeah, so you can see here that the answer is actually X is skin and Y is spinal cord. So, okay. Yeah, but there's no skin here. Is this, am I getting it different? Okay, it's not great. But don't worry, Kaya, you're correct. I think instead of gland, they have mistakenly put skin, but yeah, you're right. D is correct. X will be, it's the end of a neuron, right? So it will be connected to an effector. Effector is usually a muscle. Oh yeah, sure. I can show you the answer. So just a small adjustment here. This should be gland instead of skin, yeah? I don't know why it's that way. So yeah, the end of a neuron is usually connected to the effector, especially if this is a motor neuron. So X would be connected to either a muscle or a gland. Y is the cell body, so it has to be connected to either the spinal cord or the brain, right? Good job, Kyra. All right, next question. Let's see. Who's gonna try the next question? We have a reflex arc. All right, Ayush.
So it says, what is structure X? So structure X is connected to a receptor, right? So if I'm not wrong, then X should probably be a sensory neuron. No, yeah,
X is going to be a
sensory neuron, the third one.
sensory neuron, right? Okay, but
Oh no, actually, never mind. Because it's going to be the receptors connecting like the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. So I think it's going to be um a, sa- a s- I think the
synapse.
synapse.
Yes, very good. Yeah, they're very tricky with the question, right? You can see you have to look very carefully. They're not pointing directly at a neuron. They're pointing at the gap in between the neurons, right? Good. Yes, good that you noticed. Well done. So that's synapse. Yeah. And if you want to see the answer, yeah, the space between two neurons called a synapse. All right, 2 more questions. Who's going to take up this one? This is also reflex arc. You have to tell me the order of things. All right, Ashwini. Three nerve impulses receptor to the neuron, one sensory relay, motor effector. Yes, very good. Okay. For those of you who want to double check the answer. Yay, Ashwini is correct. Okay, 3, 1, 2. All right. And last question. Who is remaining? Oh, sorry. I saw there was 4. That was 4, including me. Okay. All right. Anyone wants to answer this? That's also fine. There's a reflex arc. You have to tell me which sequence is correct. So row A, row B, row C, or row D. All right, Ashwini, go on. Row D, RPQ. Yes, that's correct. All right, guys. Good job. So yeah, these you'll get different sort of questions and you'll get them in a mix. So I'm sure you've seen here, there's medium, hard, easy questions all in a mix. So you get to try a little bit of everything. You get to filter your subtopics, whatnot. So it gives you a lot there. And okay, last thing is we'll go through a few, since those are more MCQ type questions, they're pretty straightforward, right? But when you're writing paper 4, paper 6 questions, there are some tips you should know. These are also given on our platform, starting with very basic things like writing tips, all of that. Maybe I will not go through that much. They're just mentioning about spacing and keeping it clear and whatnot. But something that's very important in the sciences is key terms. That is why I was very focused on things even in our lesson, like, did you understand the difference between presynaptic and postsynaptic and things like that? Because you get a lot of points for that, right? So for example, they've given you a question here. State why magnesium ions are important for healthy plant development. So the answer, you could have a different options, right? Maybe you say it is needed by the plant. This is true, right? But it's a little too vague. Or they are needed by leaves. Again, it's true, but it's vague. Instead of that, if you write an answer like magnesium is a part of the chlorophyll molecule, that is a very good answer, right? Because you're using key terms like chlorophyll and that magnesium is a part of that instead of just saying it's a part of the leaf, right? So you're being more scientific about it. So yeah, key terms, very important in biology. Oops, this. Try to mind the spelling. I know sometimes keywords, spellings might not be, might be confusing. All right, another important thing is understanding what the question is asking you. So sometimes students mix up the differences between what and how, right? If the question is asking you, how does impulses pass through? Don't give the definition for an impulse, right? They're asking how it passes through. So you'll have to mention the steps on how the impulse goes from presynaptic to postsynaptic neuron. Don't mention, okay, an electrical impulse is a message that goes through from neuron. Don't mention the definition, yeah? How and what are two different things. So you have to really understand what the question is trying to ask you, yeah? And another thing is, important tip is you could see the marks. Where was that tip? So yeah, I think it was over here. The number of marks, yeah. So sometimes you might not need to write a whole lot, yeah? Focus on the question, see what it's asking you, and focus on the marks. So for example, if the marks is 3 marks, you will know that you have to write 3 points. Yeah, there should be 3 important points to write. Yeah, for example, if they are giving you a reflex arc question and they're giving you 4 points for that question to explain what is happening in a reflex arc. Yeah, you will not get 1 point for a definition. Maybe you'll get 4 points because you're describing what it is, right? They're asking you how a reflex arc works. So you have to mention stimuli, you receive a stimuli sends response to the impulse to the sensory neuron, from sensory neuron to the relay neuron. The impulse is sent from the sensory to the relay neuron, from the relay it's sent to the motor, where it will be sent to the effector to create a response. So you get 4 marks for 4 points. Is that clear? You can write the definition if you have space and whatnot, but you're not going to get a mark for that if they're asking you how instead of what, right? Any questions there? Was that clear? All right, guys. So I've since you're new, I've taken you on a little ride around our platform. You saw that how it is basically. You saw that we have our resources for PDFs, for our presentations for each of our topics. We have Tutopiya for ample amount of questions. We also have given you a bunch of tips, which I did not go through everything, but mostly the important ones. Tips for your exam preparation. And yes, that is most of what we offer. Is there any questions from our lesson?